The only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. Steve Jobs. He said this quote during the Stanford commencement address in 2005. And if you have never watched that address, I highly recommend you check it out. 13 to 14 minutes of amazing value, of him being honest and upfront, of him revealing to the public for the first time of his cancer diagnosis from the year prior. It's important to go back to 1985 to understand this quote better. As a matter of fact, probably go back to 1976 and even a little before then to understand his thought process and why he loved what he did so much. 1976, he started Apple with Steve Wozniak in his parents' garage. Steve was always someone who loved the electronics, who loved quality products. If you've ever read anything about Steve, any books about him, watched any interviews that he gave, he was very critical of many companies and very critical of many products. He would say publicly and say to people's faces when something sucked. He was not a fan of Microsoft back in the day. He would say to even his own team members, like, hey, this sucks. You can do so much better than this. He would think outside the box. People would think he was basically crazy. Like, hey, this is impossible. He's like, yes, it is. And we're going to figure out a way to make it possible. And they eventually would most of the time. He was not in it for the money. I think that's important to preface in this episode. Just not in it for the money. Never was. Well, I guess you can kind of argue once he got into the stock options situation with Apple, I think in the early 2000s, one can argue that, but I don't think he was ever truly in it for the money. During this commencement address, he talked about how he went to college. At Reed College, went there, was a student for 6 months, then dropped out. He didn't know what he wanted to do with his life at the time, and not many people do know what they want to do with their life when they're 18 years old. If you were, then mazel tov, because you're one of the select few. He dropped out of college because he's like, how is college going to help me figure out what I want to do with my life? They let him stay on campus. He slept on floors, did what he had to do. He started dropping in on classes he actually had some sort of interest in, instead of just doing the classes he had no interest in doing but was required to do. He went to this calligraphy class at Reed College, and at that time, he didn't know how important that was going to be one day. He would drop in and just be fascinated by everything with that calligraphy class. The sans serif fonts. He didn't know it at the time, but 10 years later, by him dropping in on that class, it seemed meaningless at the time. He didn't know how to apply that to anything. That eventually would change computers forever. The typefaces on computers, on the Macintosh, would change everything. Just the beauty of it. He was obsessed with the quality of everything to do with the product, the tiniest of details, even things a consumer could not see, like inside the machine. He was obsessed with the details. People were like, the engineers are like, it doesn't have to be pretty. It's inside. No one's going to see. He's like, I don't care. Everything has to look perfect. If he didn't love what he did, he wouldn't have simply cared. If he was just in it for the money, he would just be like, yeah, no one's going to see that. Let's just look how it needs to look to make it function properly. 1985, he gets kicked out of his own company. He gets fired from Apple. He doesn't know what to do with his life at this point in time. He knew what he loved doing, which is creating computers, creating technology. So he eventually started the company Next. Uppercase N, lowercase e, capital X, capital T. And in 1986, he bought Pixar from George Lucas. George Lucas, many people know him, the creator of Star Wars and that entire universe. So bought Pixar, which changed the animation movie industry forever. And Next, he mentioned in his commencement address, when Apple eventually acquired Next in 1997, which brought Steve Jobs back into the fold, he said the technology they created at Next was at the heart of Apple's eventual renaissance when he was back in the fold at Apple. So in 1997, he's the CEO of Pixar. The board at Apple wanted him to be CEO of Apple, but he wasn't sure if it was legal to be the CEO of two publicly traded companies. So he became the interim CEO at Apple. They called him iCEO, or that's at least what Walter Isaacson called him in the Steve Jobs biography. So interim CEO, but he's basically doing the duties of a CEO at Apple. So he's running both of these companies at the same time as the CEO, basically, at Apple, which he then blamed for his eventual cancer diagnosis because he was just running on fumes. He was just working all the time at both companies, managing all these employees, all these different products. Crazy, 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 crazy. How many people would want to be CEO of two companies if they didn't love what they did? How many people would care about the tiniest of details inside of a product, even though the consumer is not going to see it, if they didn't love what they did? He just was obsessed about quality, obsessed about forward thinking, obsessed about thinking about products before anyone else knew they even wanted them. As we'll get into, 2005, when he was given this commencement address, he had brought Apple back from the brink because when he was not at Apple for those 12 years, Apple was declining. The people running Apple were simply not quality and product obsessed as much as Steve was. They were more in it for the money, and consumers saw that. They saw that the quality of products was not up to what it once was. And once he came back, he's like, we have to make products better. We have to up the quality once again. And we have to think outside the box. We got to move on from being just a computer company and making other products. So 2005, when he's giving the speech, they've launched the iMac. They launched or created the iPod and iTunes, which the iPod and iTunes changed the music industry forever. Apple was thriving at this time. Like I mentioned, he had been battling pancreatic cancer. And something he said in that speech, he said he got surgery for the cancer. The doctors found out that it was a curable pancreatic cancer. He said, I'm going to be fine. And he lived another 6 years, but eventually the pancreatic cancer was the reason why he passed away. Unfortunate, because I would have loved to see what Apple would be nowadays. I would have loved to see what his thoughts would be about Apple if he was still alive. Maybe he wouldn't be running it right now, but just the direction Apple's going. Because a lot of people have been complaining about Apple for a while now about their lack of innovation. And now with AI becoming what AI is, Apple's behind the times in AI. I'm sure if he was still involved at Apple, they would be ahead. Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, he's not product obsessed like Steve was. Joni Ive, his designer with Apple, his like right-hand man basically, was obsessed with the quality of products. And he's no longer truly involved at Apple. He's no longer in the trenches building and making these products. So they've gotten away from those types of people. And now they're just innovating. In my opinion, they're doing it more for the money. They're just trying to churn out these products every single year because of the money factor. And they're able to do it because of the brand. Like, I'm never going to go away from Apple. Like, I have to stick with it. I have an iPhone, I have a Mac, I have AirPods, I have an iPad. Like, I'm never going to transition away from Apple. I just can't. The journey Steve went on throughout the early days is the reason why this quote exists. The ups and the downs, trying to find his way. And that's what he's saying to these graduates at Stanford during this address. It's going to take time for you to find what you love doing. You're going to have to try different things. And so many people are scared to try different things. I'm guilty of that. I have regrets over that. The unfortunate part is many people will never find what they truly love doing. Colonel Sanders, I always use this example. He didn't start KFC until he was 64. Some people it takes longer. Some people it doesn't take any time at all. Steve found what he loved doing when he was a young man or a young teen. Some people it's just different. So your journey is going to be different from everyone else's. And that's kind of what he's saying. A lot of very interesting things in this address. In this next part of this podcast, I'm going to start having a lot more quotes directly from this commencement address that just kind of ties everything together. Getting fired from Apple freed him to enter one of the most creative periods of his life. At the time, he didn't see that. But eventually he was able to look back and be like, wow, getting fired from Apple led to me creating this technology at Next that Apple eventually bought the company that I created. And then I was able to use the technology that I created with my new team at Next and use it for Apple's renaissance, to use it to make Apple what it is. Sometimes you just don't see it at the time. Maybe it's months later or years later where you're able to look back and think like, man, looking back, I'm glad that happened to me. Even though at the time it sucked, it changed me. It helped me. Maybe in present time, you were able to take what you learned from that experience and apply it. When I got diagnosed with the OCD in 2021, at the time it sucked. Those months initially after, sucked. I was miserable. But looking back, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It made me take my mental health seriously, made me start meditating, made me just think differently. At the time, I was like, no, this is the worst period of my life. This sucks. But 4.5 years later, it's like, damn, I'm happy that happened to me. You're just never going to know until you know. Just like the calligraphy class, like I mentioned. When he was in that class, he didn't know at the time how much of an impact that was going to have on the Macintosh and the future of Apple. He applied what he learned in that class and implemented that into the Macintosh and the fonts and the typefaces from that class. It was beautiful. It was the first personal computer to have beautiful typefaces, which has been a staple of Apple ever since. We're going to get into more quotes here because these are just amazing. This is already something like I mentioned, kind of something like I mentioned. It turned out getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. If something, bad happened in your life or you think it's bad, maybe one day you're going to look back and think like, man, I'm glad that happened because it led to this. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. Getting fired from Apple lifted a weight off of Steve's shoulders. It allowed him to be even more creative again. He started Next, was able to build this new technology that changed Apple once he went back. He could be even more creative. He could even take more risk. Well, he wasn't strained by the board at Apple and the employees that were hounding him, and he could think outside the box. He said in his address, "I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I loved what I did. You've got to find what you love. It's easy to just kind of walk into a job and never expand yourself. It's easy to work a 9 to 5, come home, cook dinner, watch TV, go to bed, repeat every day until you retire. It's easy to do that. It's easy to, not write that novel you've always wanted to write. It's easy to not build that product you've always wanted to build. It's easy to not learn about that skill that you want to learn about. Maybe it's AI and getting ahead of the AI curve and learning about that and knowing more than 99% of people. It's easy to just get caught in the mundane and never expand yourself and never continuously learn and build things and create. Once you find something you love doing, you're going to want to keep doing that thing, and it's probably going to turn out to be an amazing product or service. That's just what happens. Any successful entrepreneur or founder creates a product or service that they love, which reflects in the company being as successful as it is. Todd Graves was last episode. He loves chicken fingers. He loves giving his employees a paycheck. He loves making it a positive environment for the people that work there. He loves making a positive environment for the customers and making a product that's so craveable. There's the common theme in all the successful entrepreneurs and founders is that they love what they do. And it's simple. If you don't love the work, you're going to quit. You're not going to be able to last. You might be able to force it for the time being, but it's eventually going to reflect in the quality of the product or service if you don't love what you're doing. And right before the first iPhone was released, I remember this from the book, Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson, which I'm almost done with at this time. He discovered something with the iPhone that just was not right and had to be addressed right away. And mind you, this is right before they're about to announce the iPhone or if it's about to get released. He discovered something that was not right, and they had to address it immediately. Joni Ive was like, wow, you're right. We do have to do this right now. Other companies, other founders might have just been like, you know what, let's just roll it out and we'll deal with it after. He's like, no, this has to be perfect before it happens, before we release it to the public, before we announce it to the public. We have to fix this. Simply put, without Steve Jobs, the world would look a hell of a lot different. I wouldn't be recording this with an iPhone right now. I wouldn't be using my MacBook right in front of me. He was just so innovative. No one thought like him. So during the address, he's just saying, don't settle. Find what you love doing. I mentioned a little bit ago, talking about how so many people just get caught up in the corporate job and they don't have time to, or they don't think they have time to find the other thing they love doing, find the thing they want to do and pursue and create whatever it is. He's saying, don't do that. Find what you love doing, even if it takes decades. Find what you love doing. Never stop trying to find that thing. This right here, I wrote it down as soon as I heard it come out of his mouth. I have looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And I didn't write the second half of that quote for whatever reason, but it was along the lines, if the answer is no too many days in a row, then I know I need to change something. That's something many of us could ask, and that's something many of us would be like, no, I don't want to do what I'm about to do today. I don't love what I'm about to do. Many of us just stick with it because we think there's no other option. I've been guilty of that mindset before, just thinking like, man, I gotta stay doing what I'm doing because it just feels like there's no other option for me. It feels like so overwhelming and foggy. If it's no too many days in a row, it's like, man, you gotta make a change. You gotta really make a change, really think deeply, go in a quiet room, write down what you want and figure it out. Because you can't keep doing what you don't want to be doing. You can't keep doing what you don't even just like doing. If you're miserable doing what you're doing, then you definitely gotta make a change. Yes, you might be getting a decent paycheck. You might be paying the bills, but how long can you realistically do that for? He was such an eloquent speaker, unbelievable speaker, very charismatic, almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There's no reason not to follow your heart. We all lose sight of that. We lose sight of the fact that we're only here for a short period of time. We lose sight of the fact that the one thing we don't have control over is the fact that we're going to die one day. And that's what he's saying here. After he dealt with the first bout of his pancreatic cancer, after he was diagnosed with it, got surgery, he just had a different perspective. He's like, man, I'm going to be dead one day. Why don't I take this risk and build this product? He's like, I got nothing to lose. I'm going to be gone one day. And so many of us would benefit from thinking that way. You just have to internalize it. You can think about it for a day or two, but can you be thinking about that every single day for like 4 months straight? Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. That's an amazing one too. And I'm going to end on this. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. So, to all of you watching, all of you listening, find what you love. Even if it's not obvious right now, never stop trying to find the thing that you can wake up and say to yourself, man, I love doing this.